I arrived at the new conference center on a Thursday morning. The building was clean, modern, reinforced concrete and glass, with a focus on business clients needing privacy. My task was simple: test the soundproofing in one of the negotiation rooms reported by management. They said some sounds could be heard faintly outside the room, which should have been impossible. My colleague and I had been called because the center's own technician was unable to locate the problem. The center's floor plans detailed the walls as triple-layered with dense insulation. The measurements and materials should have barred any sound leakage. The complaint was unusual, but nothing extraordinary enough to cause concern. The room in question was a perfect square, about 20 by 20 feet, furnished simply with a table and chairs, a small conference phone, and a digital whiteboard. The walls were constructed from thick drywall and specialized, sound-absorbing panels. Lighting came from recessed LED fixtures that cast a steady glow. I began by performing my usual sequence: intensity tests, frequency sweeps, and decibel measurements from inside and outside the room. While standing outside the closed door, I first played recordings from inside, at varying volumes and frequencies, and monitored the reception through a sensitive microphone array. It quickly became clear that something was off. At certain frequencies, usually within the human voice range, a subtle but definite presence of sound was audible outside the room. Not clearly, more like a distortion or blur of conversation. Static mixed with soft syllables, as if overheard through a thick curtain. I logged the data, noting a pattern. Lower and higher frequencies did not transmit beyond the room. The issue was limited to mid-range tones between 500 to 3,000 hertz. This initially made me consider a fault in the insulation material, but that would not limit sound leakage so narrowly. I told myself it was insignificant, perhaps the thin rubber lining or a small gap at the door frame. Yet repeated physical inspections found no gap larger than 1 millimeter anywhere. The door's seals appeared fully intact, and even removing the door temporarily yielded no difference. The effect persisted. Curious, I asked my colleague to enter the room and have a short conversation with the woman, one of the managers. They spoke for about 5 minutes, discussing the issue while I stood outside in the adjacent hallway. The recording device outside captured their voices faintly, confirming the earlier test results. "We can hear you, but it's like underwater sound," I told them, replaying the captured audio. The words were distorted, punctuated by hissing, as if muffled by thick fabric, but distinct. We agreed to conduct longer tests throughout the day. That evening, I set up multiple recording devices at various points along the hallway outside the room and inside the adjacent offices. We repeated the conversations at different volumes, times of day, and environmental conditions. The results were consistent. The same faint, distorted conversation leaked out, as if the walls were partially transparent for sound, only in this narrow frequency band. I began wondering if something in the building's structure was causing resonance or echo that amplified these frequencies, creating a breach effect. However, internal tests with vibration sensors attached to the walls detected no abnormal rattling or oscillation. Several hours of continuous monitoring suggested the sound anomaly corresponded to speech patterns, but not other noises. Footsteps, chair movements, ventilation sounds, they all remained inside the room, perfectly contained. I recommended the center's architect join the next day for a structural survey. If it was a design flaw, it needed urgent correction. Yet the architect's expert review found nothing out of the ordinary. The materials matched specification. No gaps, No thin panels, no hollow cavities that could explain transmission. I documented the findings carefully. It was a sound leakage case unlike anything I had encountered. The sound passed selectively and unpredictably warped the content of conversations. Some words would distort beyond recognition. Others remained intact. My colleague expressed skepticism. Could it be the recording devices? He asked. I ran cross-checks with separate equipment, isolated power sources, and different microphones. The phenomenon persisted regardless. A week passed. I stayed on site conducting controlled experiments. We tried placing sound-absorbing cushions against the walls inside, thick acoustic blankets draped externally, rearranged furniture to create barriers. None reduced the leak. At times, the voices outside seemed clearer, but that might have been my imagination. On advice, I tested the room in isolation during a weekend when the building was empty and silent. I recorded a scripted conversation inside, while stationary microphones outside recorded from the hallway and offices. The outside recordings presented the same distorted voices. The leakage persisted without background interference. To challenge the effect further, I requested the woman to speak in a monotone, then whispered, then shouted, while the devices recorded outside. Whispered sentences barely leaked, and shouted ones did not increase clarity. Loudness was not the variable. I theorized that the materials inside the walls influenced the sound transmission unpredictably. Maybe a complex interaction between panel fibers and voice frequencies. I experimented with recording dialogue in languages with different vowel and consonant structures. Unexpectedly, the effect held. It was not linguistic. I told myself it must be a unique acoustic anomaly, perhaps a rare artifact of the materials and design. My training had no precedent for anything like this, but confidence in testing methods reassured me. 2 weeks in, I noticed a change. The leaked conversations began to include words that had not been spoken inside. Random phrases, sometimes nonsensical, sometimes seemingly related to the previous dialogue. At first, I dismissed it as audio artifacting or digital interference. I isolated the recordings, slowed them down, filtered noise, and enhanced voice frequencies. The phrases outside became clearer. At times, they formed incomplete sentences, sometimes coherent questions. For example, after a scripted query inside, the outside playback included a calm reply, even though no one had answered. I shared this with the woman and my colleague, keeping a dispassionate tone. They found it strange, but thought it might be a problem with the audio equipment's algorithms or compression artifacts. I replaced the entire recording setup to rule this out. The phenomenon remained. On a careful night, I attempted to communicate through the sound leakage by speaking into the room with specific questions, then listening outside. The replies, if truly replies, were brief and sometimes unrelated. I repeated once, twice, thrice. There was no consistent or logical pattern. My colleagues urged me to document this as a warning and recommend closing the room for use until fixed. I agreed provisionally and planned to escalate it to our research team. However, late one evening, as I was reviewing long hours of recordings, the outside audio included a voice I did not recognize. It spoke clearly, calmly, and in a tone I might describe as deliberate. The words, "Can you hear me?" I froze, or rather, I noted the event without reaction. I played the segment repeatedly. The room had been empty at the time. No one was inside. My colleague was across the building, and I was alone in the hallway. I examined the room thoroughly for hidden speakers, bugs, or any device that could have produced the sound. None were present. The building's security logs and cameras showed no entries during that time. The voice returned in subsequent recordings, sometimes asking questions, sometimes making statements about the testing conditions or the people inside the building. It was not robotic or distorted like previous leaks, but clear and measured. I considered the possibility that hallucination or my own mental state could be involved. To exclude this, I had a technician independently review the recordings. They confirmed the voice was present in the raw data, not just during playback. Whether a malfunction of equipment or an acoustic anomaly beyond scientific understanding, I could not explain. The voice never once indicated a motive or identity. It only engaged minimally, with simple phrases that did not escalate. It remained neutral, as if acknowledging my presence without bitterness or friendly intent. Unsettlingly, the voice occasionally referenced details of my own tests, including equipment brand and settings, which were not public knowledge. That suggested some level of awareness or intelligence behind the transmission. I designed a comprehensive test schedule to capture a prolonged exchange, initiating questions hours apart to investigate the extent of the voice's knowledge. The transcript showed no progress toward deeper communication beyond repetitive greetings and observations. In parallel, I advised management to suspend use of the soundproof room until repairs or investigations could progress. The architect recommended against making structural changes without clearer understanding. My personal notes grew more cautious. I reflected on the possibility that this anomaly represented a previously unknown acoustic phenomenon, or, more troubling, an interaction not governed by standard physics or technology. The building's silent design, away from major urban noise, eliminated many normal interference sources. The room's isolation was near perfect, except for this unexplained channel. I still found myself entering the room for tests, observing, measuring, cataloging. The quiet hum of the ventilation system was steady, and the LED lights above the sink remained flickering irregularly for 3 days during final testing. I told myself it was an electrical fault unrelated to the audio issue. Yet the flicker coincided with a moment during which the voice outside asked, "Are you still there?" No matter how many tests I performed or how much data I gathered, the phenomenon would not yield a conclusion. The silence it imposed was interrupted only by this faint dialogue, which remained neither comprehensible in full nor solvable by analysis. The case remained open when I left, with the room sealed and warnings applied to the building's clients. I compiled all work carefully, leaving it as a reference for future study. It was an anomaly without solution. The soundproof room was not soundproof after all. The door closed behind me,